Welcome back to Coin Reveal USA, the channel where we uncover the history, hidden details, and real market value of American coins. Today, we are taking a close look at a coin that many people could easily overlook in their pocket change, coin jar, or old collection. It is the 1984 Roosevelt Dime with the P mint mark from the Philadelphia Mint. At first glance, this coin may look like an ordinary 10-cent piece, and in many cases, that is exactly what it is. But when you start examining the date, mint mark, condition, errors, and overall quality, things can become much more interesting. So before you spend a 1984 Roosevelt Dime, stay with me until the end, because we are going to examine exactly what this coin is, how many were made, what it is made from, what the P mint mark means, how to grade it, what it is worth in today's market, and most importantly, whether your particular coin could be worth more than 10 cents. This is Coin Reveal USA, and let's reveal the truth about the 1984 Roosevelt Dime. The coin we are discussing today is the United States Roosevelt Dime dated 1984, carrying a P mint mark. The P tells us that this dime was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. The 1984 Roosevelt Dime had a very large production run, with approximately 856,669,000 examples struck. That is an enormous number of coins, and this large mintage is one of the most important reasons why an ordinary circulated example usually does not command a huge premium today. In other words, simply finding the date 1984 and the letter P does not automatically make the coin rare or extremely valuable. However, collectors know that mintage is only one part of the story. Condition, strike quality, mint errors, varieties, and exceptional certified grades can dramatically change what a coin is worth. Let's begin with the basic specifications. The 1984 Roosevelt Dime is a copper nickel-clad coin. It has a diameter of approximately 17.9 millimeters and a standard weight of about 2.27 grams. The edge is reeded, meaning it has those small grooves around the outside edge that we commonly see on U.S. dimes. The coin was designed by John R. Sinek, whose famous Roosevelt Dime design first appeared in 1946. The obverse features a portrait of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt facing left, while the reverse displays a torch in the center, an olive branch on one side, and an oak branch on the other. These symbols represent liberty, peace, and strength. So even though this coin has a face value of only 10 cents, it carries an important piece of American history. Now let's talk about the date. On the obverse, you should clearly see the number 1984 near the lower portion of the coin. The date is one of the first things collectors check when examining a Roosevelt Dime. On an average circulated coin, some of the details around the date may show wear, scratches, discoloration, or dirt. But if your 1984 date is still sharp and clearly readable, that is a good starting point. The next thing you want to look for is the mint mark. On Roosevelt dimes from this period, the mint mark is located on the obverse near the lower left area of the design, close to the bottom of Roosevelt's portrait. If you see a small letter P there, you have the Philadelphia issue. If you see a D, it came from Denver, and if you see an S on a 1984 proof dime, that indicates San Francisco. The P is especially important because it identifies the exact mint where this particular coin was struck. One interesting point about the 1984 Roosevelt Dime is that the Philadelphia Mint produced hundreds of millions of these coins. According to current coin reference information, the reported mintage is 856,669,000 pieces. That huge production number means that collectors are not generally searching for an ordinary 1984 dime simply because of its date and mint mark. There are still many examples available. This is why you should be careful whenever you see online videos or listings claiming that every 1984 dime is automatically worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. Coin value does not work that way. A normal circulated example and an exceptionally preserved certified example can have completely different values. So now we arrive at the question that most people want answered. What is the 1984 Roosevelt Dime worth today? If your coin is a normal circulated example in good condition, its collector value is generally very low. NGC's current guide for the 1984 Roosevelt Dime lists circulated examples around $700 depending on grade, while other market references show ordinary examples around face value to modest premiums. This means that a typical circulated 1984p dime is not a $100 coin, not a $1,000 coin, and certainly not automatically a $10,000 coin. Its face value remains 10 cents, and the actual amount a buyer will pay depends heavily on condition and demand. If your 1984p dime is in good circulated condition, don't be disappointed. In fact, this is exactly why coin collecting can be fascinating. You can find a coin that is more than 40 years old and still worth only a small amount above face value. But that same coin can become much more interesting if you discover an unusual error or an exceptionally high grade. The key is learning how to separate an ordinary coin from an unusual one. That's where careful examination becomes important. Let's look at condition. When collectors grade a coin, they are essentially trying to determine how much original detail remains and how much wear the coin has experienced. A heavily circulated dime may have scratches, dull surfaces, flattened details, discoloration, and worn lettering. A coin in better circulated condition will have stronger details and fewer distractions. An uncirculated coin, on the other hand, should show little or no evidence of circulation. This is where values can begin to increase, according to NGC's current guide. The 1984p Roosevelt Dime can remain at very modest values in lower grades, but values increase as the coin reaches higher uncirculated grades. The guide lists examples around 75 cents to several dollars in some lower mint state grades, with higher grades reaching considerably more. The important lesson is that the value is strongly connected to condition. A coin that looks ordinary under normal lighting may reveal much better surfaces under magnification and proper examination. Now, there is another important question. If the coin is common, why do we sometimes see very high prices for 1984p Roosevelt dimes? The answer is exceptional quality. The rare part is not necessarily the date itself. The rare part can be finding an example that survives in an extraordinary grade with exceptional surfaces and strong details. PCG's records an auction result of $8,549 for a 1984p Roosevelt dime graded Ms. 68 with full bands, sold in 2018. That is dramatically higher than the value of an ordinary circulated example. But this does not mean your regular pocket change dime is worth $854.95. That record represents an exceptionally graded coin and should not be used as the expected value for a normal specimen. This is one of the biggest mistakes new collectors make. They find a coin online that sold for hundreds of dollars and immediately assume that their coin must have the same value. But professional coin grading is extremely important at the highest levels. A coin graded Ms. 68 is completely different from a worn, circulated dime that has spent years moving through cash registers and pockets. The difference can be enormous even though both coins have exactly the same date and mint mark. Another interesting example comes from a certified 1984p Roosevelt dime graded Ms. 67. PCG's records a past sale of $2,600 for a Ms. 67 example. Again, notice the difference. The ordinary circulated coin may be worth only around its face value or a small premium, while a very high-grade certified coin can bring substantially more. This is why serious collectors inspect the surfaces, strike, luster, and overall preservation rather than simply looking at the year. Now let's talk about full bands, because you may hear this term when researching Roosevelt dimes. On the reverse of the dime, there is a torch. Across the torch are horizontal bands. When those bands are sharply and completely defined, collectors may describe the coin as having full bands, often abbreviated as FB by grading services. Strongly struck full bands can add desirability, especially when combined with a very high mint state grade. But once again, simply having visible bands does not mean that the coin is automatically worth hundreds of dollars. The entire coin must be evaluated, and certification can be especially important for premium grades. So what should you look for if you have a 1984p dime in good condition? First, check the date and mint mark. Make sure it is actually 1984 and that the mint mark is a P. Next, inspect the obverse for unusual doubling around the date, lettering, or portrait. Then turn the coin over and carefully examine the torch, lettering, branches, and rim. Look for unusual shapes, missing details, doubled elements, off-center striking, broad strikes, clipped planchets, or other characteristics that appear inconsistent with a normal coin. But there is an important warning here. Not every strange-looking mark is a valuable mint error. Coins can become damaged after leaving the mint. Scratches, dents, machine damage, corrosion, chemical discoloration, polishing, and other forms of post-mint damage can make a coin look unusual without making it rare. This is why collectors should avoid cleaning a potentially interesting coin. Cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and may reduce its desirability to collectors. If your coin is dirty, resist the temptation to scrub it with soap, metal polish, toothpaste, or any abrasive material. A coin that looks old or dark does not automatically need to be cleaned. In numismatics, original surfaces are important. Aggressive cleaning can leave scratches and unnatural surfaces that experienced collectors can easily recognize. If you believe your dime might have a valuable error, it is usually better to preserve it as found and seek expert evaluation rather than trying to make it look shiny. Now let's compare the 1984P with the other 1984 Roosevelt dimes. The Denver Mint produced approximately 704,803,976 1984D Roosevelt dimes, while San Francisco produced approximately 3,065,110 proof examples. The 1984S issue was struck as a proof coin, making it different from the regular Philadelphia circulation strike. The 1984P, with its 856,669,000 mintage, was the largest of the three reported issues. This comparison helps explain why the 1984P is usually easy to find. More than 856 million were produced. When a coin is made in such a large quantity, there needs to be something special about an individual example before it becomes significantly more valuable. That special factor could be exceptional condition, a recognized variety, or a genuine mint error. Let's imagine you find this coin inside an old jar of change. The coin is clearly circulated, the surfaces show normal wear, and there are no obvious errors. What should you do? The best approach is to keep it if you enjoy collecting, but don't expect a massive payday. Based on current guides, an ordinary circulated 1984P Roosevelt dime generally falls in the low-value category. NGC lists circulated examples around $0.15 to $0.35 depending on grade, while other sources show ordinary examples around face value or a modest premium. Now imagine a different situation. You find a 1984P dime that looks almost untouched. The fields are bright, the surfaces are clean, the lettering is sharp, the date is strong, and the reverse torch bands are exceptionally defined. Suddenly, the coin becomes much more interesting. At that point, you may want to compare it with certified examples and consider whether professional grading makes sense. High-grade examples are where the major premiums can appear. However, professional grading costs money, so you should not automatically send every 1984P dime to a grading company. If your coin is clearly circulated and ordinary, grading could cost more than the coin is worth. Certification makes much more sense when a coin has exceptional preservation, a potentially valuable error, or a realistic chance of reaching a premium grade. Always compare the potential value with the cost of authentication, grading, shipping, and insurance. One of the most exciting parts of coin collecting is the possibility of finding something unexpected. Even when a date is common, collectors continue searching because valuable varieties and errors can exist. But remember this important rule: rarity must be supported by evidence. A social media post saying that a particular dime is worth thousands of dollars is not enough. Look for recognized varieties, reputable auction records, professional grading information, and multiple independent references before deciding that you have a valuable coin. The 1984P Roosevelt dime also has an interesting historical connection because it belongs to the long-running Roosevelt Dime series. Franklin D. Roosevelt's portrait has appeared on the dime since 1946, and the design remains one of the most recognizable U.S. coin designs. By 1984, Americans had already been using Roosevelt dimes for decades. Your 1984 coin is therefore not an ancient rarity, but it is now more than 40 years old and represents a specific period in American coinage history. Let's talk about the metal for a moment. The 1984P Roosevelt dime is not a silver dime. This is extremely important because many people see an older-looking dime and assume it contains silver. Silver Roosevelt dimes were produced from 1946 through 1964. Beginning in 1965, regular Roosevelt dimes changed to a copper-nickel-clad composition. The 1984P issue therefore does not have the valuable silver. Content associated with earlier Roosevelt dimes. This is another reason why you should not expect a large precious metal premium simply because the coin is from the 1980s. The coin's approximate weight of 2.27 grams and diameter of 17.9 millimeters are also useful when checking an unusual coin. If your coin seems dramatically different in weight or size, that could be worth investigating. But be careful, because worn coins can have small variations and home scales may not be perfectly accurate. A suspected wrong planchet or other major mint error should be examined by a qualified specialist rather than declared valuable based only on a cheap digital scale. So, what is the bottom line for the 1984p Roosevelt dime in good condition? If you have an ordinary circulated example with normal wear and no recognized error, its value is generally close to face value, with current collector references putting circulated examples in roughly the 15 to 35 cent range depending on grade. That means this is not normally a high-dollar coin in ordinary condition. But if your dime is in exceptional uncirculated condition, especially with strong strike characteristics and full bands, the potential value can rise significantly. NGC's current guide shows substantially higher prices for premium mint state grades, and PCG's auction records demonstrate that exceptional certified examples can bring hundreds of dollars, and this is exactly why you should never judge a coin only by its age. A 40-year-old coin is not automatically rare. Mintage, survival rate, condition, demand, errors, varieties, and certification all matter. The 1984p Roosevelt dime is a perfect example. More than 856 million were struck, so the date itself is common. Yet an extraordinary specimen can still attract serious collector attention. Before we finish, take one final close look at your coin. Check the date. Check for the P mint mark. Examine Roosevelt's portrait. Look around the lettering. Turn the coin over and inspect the torch and its bands. Look carefully at the rim and edge. Check for unusual doubling or striking characteristics. Most importantly, compare what you see with trusted references rather than relying on sensational claims. If your 1984p dime is simply a normal circulated coin, there is nothing wrong with that. Its greatest value may be the history and enjoyment it brings to your collection. But if you discover an unusually sharp, well-preserved example or a genuine mint error, then you may have something worth investigating further. Coin collecting is not only about finding a coin worth thousands of dollars. It is about learning how coins were made, understanding their history, and knowing what makes one example different from another. So, if you have a 1984p Roosevelt dime sitting in your collection, don't throw it away, but don't assume it is a fortune either. The ordinary circulated example is generally a low-value coin, while exceptional certified examples can be worth considerably more. The current NGC information and documented PCG's auction results show exactly why condition can make such a dramatic difference. Next up, the 1974 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark. If you have a 1974 dime and you look near the date but cannot find a letter like P or D, don't throw it away and don't assume the mint forgot to mark the coin. In 1974, a Roosevelt dime with no mint mark was completely normal because it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which did not place a mint mark on these regular circulation dimes. Today, we are going to examine this coin from every important angle, including its history, mintage, design, metal composition, condition, current market value, possible errors, high-grade examples, and the important details that could make your particular coin more interesting. So stay with me until the end, because this ordinary-looking 10-cent coin may have more to reveal than you expect. This is Coin Reveal USA, and let's reveal the 1974 Roosevelt dime. The 1974 Roosevelt dime is part of one of the longest-running coin designs in American history. The Roosevelt dime first appeared in 1946, honoring President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. By 1974, the design had already been in circulation for nearly 3 decades. The obverse shows Roosevelt facing left, with the inscriptions "Liberty, in God we trust," and the year 1974. The reverse features the famous torch in the center, with an olive branch on the left and an oak branch on the right. Together, these elements represent ideas of liberty, peace, and strength. The design was created by John R. Sinek, and it remains one of the most recognizable designs in United States coinage. Now let's get to the first big question about this coin. Why doesn't your 1974 dime have a mint mark? The answer is Philadelphia. In this period, coins produced at the Philadelphia Mint generally carried no mint mark. So when you see a 1974 Roosevelt Dime with no letter underneath or near the date, that is not an error by itself. It identifies the coin as a Philadelphia issue. Current coin references list the 1974 Philadelphia Roosevelt Dime with a reported mintage of 470,248,000 pieces. That is a very large number, and this high mintage is one of the main reasons an ordinary circulated 1974 no mint mark dime is generally worth only its face value or a small premium. This is an important point because many people search online for phrases like 197 dime no mint mark rare and then become confused when they see extremely high asking prices. A coin being old does not automatically make it rare. A coin being without a mint mark does not automatically make it an error. In the case of the 1974 Roosevelt Dime, the absence of a mint mark is normal for the Philadelphia issue. If your coin has no mint mark, that is exactly what you should expect from a Philadelphia 1974 dime. Let's talk about the basic specifications. The 1974 Roosevelt Dime is approximately 17.9 millimeters in diameter and weighs about 2.27 grams. It is a copper-nickel clad coin rather than a silver coin. The outer layers contain copper and nickel, while the core is copper. This is extremely important because some people assume that every old Roosevelt dime contains silver. That is not true. The silver Roosevelt dime era ended in 1964. The regular 1974 Roosevelt dime is a clad coin, so you should not value it as a silver dime simply because it is more than 50 years old. Current references identify the 1974 issue as clad and list its weight at approximately 2.27 grams. Now let's look at the mintage. Approximately 470,248,000 1974 Roosevelt dimes were struck at Philadelphia. There were also millions of 197 dimes struck at Denver, while San Francisco produced proof examples. The Philadelphia issue is therefore not considered a rare coin simply because it has no mint mark. In fact, the no mint mark version is one of the normal circulation issues from that year. Numista and other coin references also list the 1974 Philadelphia issue at 470,248,000 pieces. So now let's answer the question most viewers are waiting for. What is a 1974 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark worth today? If your coin is circulated and shows normal wear from everyday use, the answer is usually very modest. Current references put ordinary circulated examples around $600 to a small premium depending on the exact grade and market. Numista's current indicative values show the 1974 issue around face value in lower grades, while other market references similarly place ordinary circulated examples near $500 value. That means if you have a worn 1974 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark, don't expect it to automatically be worth $100. $500 or $1,000. In most cases, it is simply a common clad dime. But there is an important second part to the story. The value can increase when the coin is preserved in unusually high condition. And even more interesting possibilities can exist if the coin has a genuine mint error or recognized variety. Let's examine condition because this is where the story changes. Coin collectors don't simply ask what year a coin is. They ask how well that coin survived. A circulated dime may have scratches, flattened details, contact marks, dull surfaces, and general wear. A coin that spent most of its life protected from circulation can retain much sharper details and original mint luster. The difference between those two coins can be significant to collectors. If your 1974 no mint mark dime is in what collectors would call good condition, you should expect heavy circulation wear. Roosevelt's hair and facial details may be somewhat flattened, and the reverse design may show considerable wear. The rim may have small marks, and the surfaces may have scratches or discoloration. At this level, the coin is generally a face value or very small premium item. If the coin is fine or very fine, more detail remains visible. Roosevelt's portrait will have stronger features, and the reverse torch branches and lettering will be more clearly defined. But even at these grades, the 1974 Philadelphia dime is still a common coin. The big premiums generally come when you move into high uncirculated grades. An about uncirculated example has very little circulation wear. You may see only slight friction on the highest points of the design. An uncirculated example should show no obvious evidence of having been used in commerce. It can still have contact marks from the minting and handling process, but it retains its original mint state characteristics. This is where things become much more interesting. Current price references show that uncirculated 1974 no mint mark Roosevelt dimes can command more than face value, with some published guides showing values rising into several dollars as grade improves. APMEX's Roosevelt Dime Guide, for example, lists the 1974 Philadelphia issue at approximately $1 in some early mint state grades and higher amounts at stronger grades, reaching substantially higher guide values at the top of its listed range. Another current reference, USA Coin Book, lists an estimated value of about $2.79 or more for a 1974 Roosevelt dime in uncirculated mint state condition. This is a guide value rather than a guaranteed selling price, but it demonstrates the important difference between an ordinary circulated coin and a better preserved example. Now let's talk about the possibility of a truly high-grade example. This is where some coin videos can become misleading. You may see a 1974 Roosevelt dime advertised for hundreds of dollars and wonder how a 10-cent coin could possibly reach that level. The answer is usually grade, certification, rarity at that grade, and collector demand. Some market references show very high values for top-grade 1974 Roosevelt dimes, including examples in Ms. 67 and beyond. Price charting, for example, currently lists guide prices that rise dramatically at the very highest grades. Although these figures should be treated as market guide estimates rather than a guarantee that every coin at that grade will sell for that amount, this brings us to an extremely important rule for coin collectors. Don't confuse an asking price with a real market value. Someone can put a common 1974 dime online for $10,000, but that does not mean someone will actually pay $10,000 for it. The most useful evidence comes from reputable price guides, certified coins, and actual completed auction sales. A realistic value should always be based on the coin's condition and genuine market demand. Now let's look at the reverse of the coin. The torch is one of the most important areas to inspect. The Roosevelt dime has horizontal bands around the torch. On exceptionally well-struck coins, these bands can be very sharp and complete. Collectors sometimes refer to this characteristic as full bands or FB. On Roosevelt dimes, strong full bands can make a high-grade coin more desirable. But remember, full bands do not automatically turn a circulated dime into a valuable coin. The entire coin must have exceptional preservation and strike quality for the designation to become especially important. If you are examining your 1974 dime at home, use a good light and, if possible, a magnifying glass. Start with the date. Look carefully at each digit in 1974. Then examine Liberty and In God We Trust. Look for unusual doubling, especially if something appears to be clearly separated rather than simply damaged. Next, move to the reverse and inspect United States of America, one dime, the torch, the olive branch, and the oak branch. But here is something extremely important. A damaged coin can look like an error. Scratches, dents, gouges, chemical damage, machine damage, and corrosion can create strange shapes that are not valuable mint errors. If you see something unusual, don't immediately assume you've found a rare variety. Compare the feature carefully with known examples and, if necessary, have it examined by a professional. One of the worst things you can do to a potentially valuable coin is clean it aggressively. Do not use metal polish, toothpaste, abrasive powders, rough cloths, or other household cleaners. Cleaning can leave permanent hairline scratches and unnatural surfaces. Collectors generally prefer coins with original surfaces, and harsh cleaning can significantly reduce desirability. Now let's consider errors. The 1974 Roosevelt dime is not famous simply because it has no mint mark. Again, that part is normal. But genuine mint errors are a different matter. A major off-center strike, clipped planchet, wrong planchet, dramatic doubled feature, or another authenticated mint error can make an otherwise common coin much more interesting. The key word is authenticated. If your coin looks strange, don't rely only on a social media post or an online seller's description. Genuine errors should be carefully verified. You should also be careful with claims about missing P errors. On a 1974 Philadelphia dime, there is normally no P mint mark. Therefore, the absence of a P is not an error. This is one of the most important facts to remember about this coin. A 1974 dime without a mint mark is supposed to look that way because Philadelphia did not put a mint mark on the regular issue. Current references specifically identify the no mint mark 1974 dime as the Philadelphia issue. Now let's compare the 1974 Philadelphia dime with the 1974D dime. The Denver issue carries a D mint mark, while the Philadelphia issue has no mint mark. Both were regular circulation coins, and both were made in very large quantities. So if you find a 1974 dime with no mint mark, you don't have a missing mint mark. You have the Philadelphia version. What about the 1974S? That is a different situation because San Francisco produced proof coins. Proof coins were specially made for collectors and have different striking characteristics and presentation. If you have a 1974 dime with an S mint mark and a mirror-like appearance, you may be looking at a proof issue rather than a normal circulation coin. Now let's imagine that you have a 1974 no mint mark dime in good condition. What should you do with it? First, preserve it. Don't clean it. Second, inspect it carefully under good lighting. Third, determine whether it is circulated or uncirculated. Fourth, look for unusual mint characteristics. And fifth, compare your coin with reliable references before spending money on professional grading. If the coin is heavily circulated, professional grading usually isn't economical. Remember that grading services charge fees, and you may also have shipping and insurance costs. If your coin is worth only 10 or 20 cents, paying a substantial amount to have it certified doesn't make financial sense. But if you genuinely believe you have a superb uncirculated example or a major mint error, professional evaluation can be worth considering. One of the most exciting things about collecting Roosevelt dimes is that you can learn a huge amount from coins that are still relatively inexpensive. You can practice identifying mint marks, grading surfaces, studying strikes, recognizing damage, and understanding the difference between face value and collector value. The 1974 no mint mark dime is actually a great coin for learning these skills. Let's summarize the value picture. For an ordinary circulated 1974 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark, expect approximately face value to a small premium, depending on condition and the buyer. Current new misted data shows the coin around the 10-cent range in lower grades, while other references similarly place ordinary circulated pieces near face value. For an about uncirculated or mint state example, values can move higher. AppMex currently lists guide values around $1 and above in some uncirculated grades, with higher amounts for better preserved examples. USA Coin Book currently estimates about $2.79 or more for an uncirculated 1974 Roosevelt dime. At the very highest grades, some price guides show much larger numbers, but those coins are not representative of the typical 1974 dime found in circulation. A top-grade certified coin is a completely different collectible from a worn example found in an old jar. This is why you should always identify the condition before deciding what your coin might be worth. And now let's answer the biggest question one more time. Is the 1974 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark rare? The answer is no, not simply because it has no mint mark. The no mint mark Philadelphia issue was a normal part of 1974 U.S. coinage, with approximately 470 million examples produced. The interesting part comes from condition. Exceptional strike quality, recognized varieties, or genuine mint errors. So if you have one of these coins in your pocket change, don't panic and don't expect a fortune. But don't ignore it either. Take a closer look. Check the date. Check the surfaces. Check the reverse torch. Look at the lettering. Examine the rim. Look for anything unusual. And most importantly, learn the difference between damage and a real mint error. The 1974 Roosevelt dime may be common, but common coins can still tell fascinating stories. More than 50 years after it was produced, this little 10-cent piece can teach us about American history, the Philadelphia Mint, the transition to clad coinage, coin grading, mint errors, and the collector market. And that is what makes coin collecting so exciting. You don't need to start with an expensive rare coin. Sometimes the most interesting discoveries begin with the change sitting right in front of you. So, if you have a 1974 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark, take it out and inspect it carefully before spending it. If it's worn and ordinary, it will probably remain a 10-cent coin or bring only a small premium. If it is unusually well preserved, however, it could be worth more to collectors. And if you discover a genuine mint error or an exceptional high-grade example, that's when you should investigate further. Next up, the 1993 Roosevelt Dime with the P mint mark from the Philadelphia Mint. At first glance, this coin may look like an ordinary 10-cent piece. And in most circulated conditions, that is exactly what it is. But when you look closely at the date, mint mark, condition, strike quality, reverse bands, and possible mint errors, you can discover why collectors still pay attention to coins like this. So before you spend your 1993p Roosevelt Dime, stay with me because we are going to examine its history, mintage, design, metal composition, condition grades, current market value, and the important details that could make an ordinary-looking dime much more interesting. This is Coin Reveal USA, and let's reveal the 1993p Roosevelt Dime. The coin we are discussing today is the 1993 Roosevelt Dime carrying the P mint mark. That small p tells us that this coin was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. The Roosevelt Dime design has been part of American coinage since 1946, when it was introduced to honor President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. By 1993, Americans had already been using Roosevelt dimes for almost half a century. The obverse shows Roosevelt's portrait facing left, along with the words "Liberty" and "In God We Trust," followed by the date 1993. On the reverse, you will see the central torch surrounded by an olive branch and an oak branch, along with United States of America and one dime. It is a simple-looking design, but it contains several details that collectors examine very carefully. The 1993p Roosevelt Dime had a very large production run. Approximately 766,180,000 regular 1993p Roosevelt dimes were struck at the Philadelphia Mint. That number is extremely important when discussing value because a large mintage usually means that an ordinary example is not rare. There are still many 1993p dimes available to collectors, especially in circulated grades. So if you have a normal worn 1993p dime, don't assume that the date and P mint mark alone make it a valuable rarity. The real story is in the condition, errors, varieties, and exceptionally high grades. Use a coin book. Let's start with the most important identification detail, the mint mark. On the 1993 Roosevelt Dime, the P mint mark appears on the obverse, near the lower left side of the portrait. If you look closely around the area near the bottom of Roosevelt's portrait, you should be able to find a small letter P. That tiny letter is what separates the Philadelphia issue from the Denver issue, which carries a D. If you find a 1993 dime with a P, you have the Philadelphia version. Now let's talk about the composition of this coin. The 1993p Roosevelt Dime is not a silver dime. It is a copper nickel-clad coin. The regular Roosevelt Dime switched away from silver beginning in 1965, so a 1993 dime should not be treated as a silver coin simply because it is several decades old. The coin has a diameter of approximately 17.9 millimeters and weighs about 2.27 grams. Its edge is reeded, which means it has the familiar grooves around the outside. These basic specifications can be useful when checking a suspicious or unusual coin. Although small differences can occur due to wear and manufacturing tolerances, now we come to the question everybody wants answered. How much is a 1993p Roosevelt dime worth today? If your coin is an ordinary circulated example, the answer is usually not very exciting financially. It is generally worth around face value, with some references assigning a small collector premium depending on the exact grade. USA Coin Book currently lists estimated values beginning around face value for lower circulated grades and increasing as condition improves. This is exactly what we would expect from a coin with a mintage of more than 766 million pieces. Use a coin book. So if your 1993p dime has scratches, circulation wear, dull surfaces, flattened details, and signs of everyday use, it probably isn't a high-dollar coin. But don't stop watching yet, because the situation changes when we start talking about uncirculated coins. Coin collectors care deeply about condition. A circulated coin has been used in commerce and has experienced friction against other coins and surfaces. Over time, this creates wear on the highest points of the design. An uncirculated coin has not experienced normal circulation wear, although it can still have contact marks and other imperfections from production and handling. For a 1993p Roosevelt dime, higher mint state grades can be considerably more interesting than ordinary circulated examples. Current price references show that values can increase as the coin reaches stronger uncirculated grades. USA Coin Book's current guide gives higher estimated values for uncirculated examples and substantially higher guide values for exceptionally high grades. These are estimates rather than guaranteed selling prices, so actual market results can vary. USA Coin Book. This brings us to something every coin collector should understand. A price guide is not the same thing as a guaranteed sale price. You might find an online listing asking hundreds of dollars for a 1993p dime, but an asking price does not prove that the coin is worth hundreds of dollars. Real market value is better established through actual completed sales, reputable auction records, and professionally graded examples. Now let's talk about the reverse of the coin, because this is one of the most important areas to inspect. Look at the torch. Across the torch are horizontal bands. When these bands are sharply defined and complete, collectors may describe the coin as having full bands, often abbreviated as FB. On a high-grade Roosevelt Dime, strong full bands can make the coin more desirable. But remember, the bands alone don't make an ordinary circulated dime valuable. The coin needs to have excellent overall preservation and a strong strike for full bands to become a major factor. If you have a 1993p dime that looks unusually bright and untouched, take a closer look at the reverse. Don't just look at whether the coin shines. A shiny coin can have scratches or cleaning damage. Instead, examine the surfaces under good lighting. Look for original mint luster, minimal contact marks, sharp lettering, and strong details in the torch bands. One of the biggest mistakes people make when searching for valuable coins is confusing shine with condition. Someone may polish an old dime until it looks bright and reflective, but that does not make it uncirculated. In fact, cleaning or polishing can damage the surface and make the coin less desirable to collectors. Never use toothpaste, metal polish, abrasive cleaners, or rough materials to try to improve the appearance of a potentially valuable coin. Now let's discuss the possibility of errors. A common date can become much more interesting if the individual coin contains a genuine mint error. When inspecting your 1993p dime, look for major abnormalities such as an off-center strike, clipped planchet, broad strike, dramatic doubling, unusual die characteristics, or other recognized mint errors. However, you must be very careful here. Not every strange-looking coin is a mint error. Dimes can become damaged after leaving the mint. Parking meters, vending machines, coin machines, other coins, tools, chemicals, and years of circulation can create unusual marks. A scratch through a letter is usually damage, not a valuable doubled die. A dent on the rim is not automatically a mint error. A flattened area can result from circulation rather than the minting process. If you believe your 1993p Roosevelt Dime has a genuine error, compare it with trusted references and consider professional authentication before assuming it is valuable. Now let's look at the history behind the Roosevelt design. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt died in 1945, and the U.S. Mint moved quickly to create a coin honoring him. The Roosevelt Dime was introduced in 1946, and the design by John R. Sinek has remained remarkably consistent. The reverse torch is surrounded by an olive branch symbolizing peace and an oak branch symbolizing strength. The coin therefore carries more than just a 10-cent denomination. It represents a major period in American history and the legacy of one of the country's most influential presidents. By the time your 1993p dime was struck, the United States had already experienced enormous technological and cultural changes since the Roosevelt dime first appeared. Yet the same basic design remained in circulation. That makes every Roosevelt dime part of a long-running historical series. Now let's return to the 1993p specifically. With a mintage of approximately 766 million, this coin is common enough that collectors can usually find examples without much difficulty. That means the date itself is not the main source of value. Instead, you need to focus on condition and unusual characteristics. This is a recurring lesson in coin collecting. A coin can be old and common, or relatively modern and difficult to find in exceptional condition. Rarity is not simply about age. If your 1993p Roosevelt dime is in good condition, expect it to be worth approximately face value in most circumstances. In fine or very fine condition, it may still be only slightly above face value. In about uncirculated condition, a small premium becomes more realistic. In mint state condition, values can increase depending on grade, strike quality, surface preservation, and collector demand. The highest quality certified examples can command significantly more than ordinary circulated pieces, according to current USA coin book information. The 1993p Roosevelt Dime can reach substantially higher guide values in top uncirculated grades, with the listed values depending heavily on the grade. Again, these should be treated as reference estimates and not promises of what every coin will sell for. Opening parenthesis usacoinbook.com. This is why grading is so important. Professional grading companies examine a coin under controlled conditions and assign a grade based on factors including wear, surface preservation, strike, and overall appearance. A certified MS coin is different from a raw coin that simply looks shiny to the owner, but should you send your 1993p dime to a grading company? Usually not if it is a normal circulated coin. The cost of grading, shipping, and insurance can easily exceed the value of an ordinary dime. If the coin is heavily worn, scratched, damaged, or clearly circulated, keeping it in your collection is usually more practical. If, however, your coin appears nearly perfect, has strong original luster, very few marks, sharp details, and excellent torch bands, then further research may be worthwhile. You can compare it with certified examples and determine whether professional grading makes financial sense. Let's also discuss the edge. A normal Roosevelt dime should have a reeded edge with evenly spaced grooves. When examining your coin, look at the edge from different angles. If you notice something dramatically unusual, such as an incomplete edge or a strange planchet shape, don't immediately clean or alter the coin. Preserve it and investigate it further. Genuine planchet and striking errors can be valuable, but they need proper identification. Another useful test is weight. A standard 1993p Roosevelt dime should weigh around 2.7 grams. If you have an accurate digital scale and your coin is significantly different from the expected weight, that could be worth investigating. But remember that a home scale is not enough to prove a mint error. Dirt, wear, damage, or measurement inaccuracies can produce differences. A professional examination is necessary before making a major claim. Now let's talk about one of the most important rules in coin collecting: never clean your coins. This deserves repeating because it can save collectors from making an expensive mistake. If your 1993p dime is dark, dirty, brownish, gray, or discolored, leave it alone until you know what you are dealing with. Original surfaces can be valuable to collectors. Cleaning can create hairlines, remove natural toning, and permanently alter the appearance of the coin. A coin does not need to look brand new to be valuable. In fact, collectors often prefer coins with original surfaces. So if you find a potentially interesting dime in an old collection, resist the urge to make it shiny. Now let's consider whether the 1993p Roosevelt dime could be a silver coin. The answer is no for the regular issue. By 1993, Roosevelt dimes had been made from copper nickel-clad material for decades. Silver Roosevelt dimes ended in 1964. Therefore, if you have a 1993p dime, its value is not coming from silver content. Its potential collector value comes from condition, rarity, errors, varieties, and demand. This is another reason why coin collectors need to identify the exact date and composition before making assumptions. A 1964 Roosevelt dime and a 1993 Roosevelt dime can look very similar, but their metal compositions are different and their market values can be very different. Now imagine you find your 1993p Roosevelt dime in an old coin jar. It has some scratches, moderate wear, and a dull appearance. You inspect the date and confirm it is 1993. You find the P mint mark. You inspect the reverse and don't see anything unusual. In this situation, you probably have a normal circulated 1993p dime. It may be interesting historically, but it is unlikely to be a major financial discovery. But imagine another 1993p dime. This one looks almost untouched. The surfaces are clean and original, the lettering is sharp, the portrait details are strong, and the reverse torch bands are exceptionally clear. Now you have something worth researching. It may still not be worth a fortune, but the condition could put it into a much more desirable category, and this is the real secret of modern coin collecting. The rarest part of a common coin can sometimes be its condition. Millions may have been produced, but far fewer may survive today at the very highest grades with exceptional surfaces and strike quality. Let's talk about market value one more time. For a normal circulated 1993p Roosevelt dime, think primarily in terms of face value or a small premium. Current references show that lower grade examples are generally inexpensive. As the grade rises, the value can increase, with uncirculated and high-grade certified examples attracting stronger collector interest. USA Coin Book currently provides a grade-based value range that demonstrates this large difference between ordinary and exceptional examples. Use a coin book so if someone tells you that every 1993p dime is worth $500, don't believe that claim without evidence. If someone says every 1993p dime is worthless, that isn't completely accurate either. The correct answer depends on the individual coin, the condition, strike, surfaces, mint errors, varieties, and certification all matter. A heavily circulated coin is one thing. A pristine high-grade coin is another. A genuine mint error is another. A rare variety is another. This is why professional collectors never determine value from the date alone. Before we finish, I want you to perform one final inspection of your 1993p Roosevelt Dime. Start with the date and make sure all 4 digits are clear. Then locate the P mint mark. Examine the portrait for unusual doubling. Check the lettering around Liberty and In God We Trust. Turn the coin over and carefully inspect the torch, especially the horizontal bands. Check the branches, lettering, and rim. Finally, look at the edge for anything unusual. If everything looks normal and the coin shows regular circulation wear, you probably have a common 1993p Roosevelt Dime worth around face value or a small premium. If the coin is extremely well preserved, research its grade. And if you find something that looks like a genuine mint error, preserve the coin and seek expert advice before cleaning or selling it. The 1993p Roosevelt Dime may not be one of the rarest American coins, but it is still a fascinating piece of United States history. More than 766 million were produced at Philadelphia, and millions of these coins have traveled through American commerce. Today, some remain in pocket change, some sit inside old jars, some are stored in collections, and a smaller number survive in exceptional condition. So the next time you see a 1993 Roosevelt Dime with a P mint mark, don't immediately throw it into your change pile. Take a second look. The P tells you where it was made, the condition tells you how well it survived, and the details tell you whether it deserves further investigation. Next up, the 1976 Roosevelt Dime with the D mint mark from the Denver Mint. If you have one of these dimes in your collection, an old coin jar, or even in your pocket change, you may be wondering whether it is worth more than its 10-cent face value. The answer depends heavily on the condition, the quality of the strike, the surfaces, and whether the coin has a genuine mint error or unusual variety. So before you spend that 1976 Roosevelt Dime, stay with me until the end, because we are going to look at its history, mintage, composition, design, condition, current market value, and the important details that could make your particular coin more valuable. This is Coin Reveal USA, and let's reveal the 1976 Roosevelt Dime. The 1976 Roosevelt Dime is especially interesting because it was produced during America's bicentennial year. In 1976, the United States celebrated the 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Special bicentennial designs were created for the quarter, half dollar, and dollar, but the Roosevelt Dime kept its traditional design. That means your 1976 dime does not have a special bicentennial reverse like the 1776 to 1976 quarter, half dollar, or Eisenhower dollar. Instead, it carries the familiar Franklin D. Roosevelt portrait on the front and the torch, olive branch, and oak branch on the reverse. The D mint mark tells us that this coin was struck at the Denver Mint. On the obverse, look near the lower left area of Roosevelt's portrait, close to the date. You should see a small letter D. That tiny letter is extremely important for identifying the coin because it separates the Denver issue from the 1976 Philadelphia issue, which has no mint mark. The San Francisco Mint also produced 1976 Roosevelt Dimes as proofs for collectors. The 1976 Roosevelt Dime had a very large mintage. Approximately 695,222,774 examples were struck at Denver. That is an enormous production number, and it immediately tells us something important about the coin's rarity. The 1976 Roosevelt Dime is not generally rare simply because of its date and D mint mark. Millions of examples were made, and many have survived. Therefore, an ordinary circulated example is generally worth very little above its face value. But that does not mean every 1976 dime is worthless. Condition and special characteristics can make a major difference. Let's talk about the coin's basic specifications. The regular 19760 Roosevelt Dime is a copper nickel-clad coin. It weighs approximately 2.7 grams and has a diameter of about 17.9 millimeters. The edge is reeded. The coin is not made from silver. This is an important point because some people see a dime from the 1970s and assume that it contains silver. Regular Roosevelt dimes changed from silver to copper nickel-clad composition beginning in 1965. So the 19760 is a clad coin rather than a silver dime. The obverse features the portrait of President Franklin D. Roosevelt facing left. Around the portrait are the inscriptions "Liberty," "In God We Trust," and the date 1976. On the reverse, you will see the central torch with horizontal bands, an olive branch on the left, and an oak branch on the right. The words United States of America and one dime complete the reverse design. Now let's get to the question everyone wants answered. What is the 19760 Roosevelt dime worth today? If your 19760 dime is a normal circulated coin in good condition, its value is usually around face value. In many everyday transactions, it is still simply a 10-cent coin. Some collectors may pay a small premium for attractive examples, but there is generally no huge premium for an ordinary worn specimen. Current coin value references similarly place circulated examples at very modest prices, with values increasing as the grade rises. So if your coin has scratches, flattened details, dull surfaces, contact marks, and obvious circulation wear, don't expect it to be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars just because it is from 1976. The date itself is common. The D mint mark is normal, and the coin was produced in huge numbers. However, this is where the story gets interesting. Coin collectors pay much more attention to coins that survive in exceptional condition. A 19760 Roosevelt dime that has never been circulated can be worth more than face value, especially if it has strong luster, sharp details, minimal contact marks, and an excellent strike. When examining your coin, don't just ask whether it looks shiny. Shine alone does not prove that a coin is uncirculated. A cleaned or polished coin can look extremely bright but still be undesirable to collectors. Instead, look for original mint luster across the surfaces. Rotate the coin under a light and watch how the luster moves across the fields. Check Roosevelt's portrait for contact marks, scratches, and signs of wear. Then examine the reverse. The reverse is particularly important because of the torch. Roosevelt dime collectors often pay close attention to the horizontal bands across the torch. On exceptionally well-struck coins, those bands can be very sharp and complete. You may hear collectors and grading services refer to this as full bands, or FB. A high-grade Roosevelt dime with strong full bands can be more desirable than an otherwise similar coin with weaker details, but remember this very important rule. Full bands do not automatically make every 19760 dime valuable. The coin still needs to have excellent overall preservation and a strong grade. A circulated dime with visible bands is not suddenly a $500 coin. The highest premiums generally go to coins that combine exceptional grade, strong strike characteristics, and collector demand. Let's talk about condition in more detail. If your 19760 Roosevelt dime is in good condition, it will show substantial circulation wear. The high points of Roosevelt's hair and facial features may be flattened. The reverse details will also show wear, and the surfaces may have scratches or contact marks. At this level, the coin is generally worth little more than its face value. In fine condition, the coin retains more detail. The lettering remains clear, Roosevelt's portrait is better defined, and the reverse design is easier to see. But because the 19760 issue is so common, fine condition alone does not make the coin rare. In very fine condition, even more detail remains visible. Again, this is useful for collectors, but the coin generally remains a low-value item unless it has another special characteristic. In about uncirculated condition, the coin shows very little circulation wear. You may see slight friction on the highest points, but much of the original detail remains. This is where a small collector premium can become more realistic. Then we reach mint state. A mint state coin has no normal circulation wear. Instead, the collector looks at surface preservation, luster, strike quality, and contact marks. A high-grade mint state 19760 Roosevelt Dime can be much more interesting than the typical circulated example. This is an important lesson about modern coins. A coin can have a huge mintage and still become scarce in very high grades. Hundreds of millions may have been produced, but relatively few may survive today with exceptional surfaces, minimal marks, strong luster, and an outstanding strike. This is why condition rarity can be more important than overall mintage. Now let's talk about possible errors. If you have a 19760 Roosevelt Dime, you should always inspect it carefully for genuine minting abnormalities. Look for dramatic off-center strikes, clipped planchets, broad strikes, major die doubling, missing design elements caused by a genuine mint problem, or other recognized errors, but there is a major warning here. Many damaged coins are incorrectly described as errors online. A scratch is not automatically a doubled die. A dent is not automatically a mint error. A flattened area can be caused by circulation or mechanical damage. A strange color can result from chemicals or environmental exposure rather than the mint. This is why you should never decide that a coin is rare simply because something looks unusual. Compare the feature with known examples and, if the potential value is significant, consider professional authentication. Another thing you should never do is clean the coin. This is especially important if you think you have found an error or a high-grade example. Do not use toothpaste, metal polish, abrasive powder, chemicals, or rough cloth. Cleaning can leave permanent scratches and destroy the original surface. A collector may prefer an original-looking coin with natural toning and minor dirt over a polished coin with unnatural surfaces. Now let's return to the historical importance of 1976. The United States was celebrating its bicentennial, and millions of Americans were participating in events marking 200 years of independence. The U.S. Mint produced special bicentennial quarters, half dollars, and dollars, but the Roosevelt dime remained essentially unchanged. That makes the 1976 dime an interesting companion to the famous bicentennial coins. If you collect American coins by year, the 19760 Roosevelt dime can be an excellent addition because it represents one of the most memorable years in U.S. history. Even if the coin isn't worth a lot financially, it still carries a connection to America's bicentennial celebration. Now let's compare the 19760 with other Roosevelt dimes from the same year. Philadelphia produced regular Roosevelt dimes without a mint mark, while Denver produced the D-mint marked circulation issue. San Francisco produced proof examples. The Denver coin is therefore a standard business strike made for everyday commerce. This distinction is important when researching value. A regular 19760 circulation coin should not be compared directly with a proof coin or a rare error. Different production methods and characteristics can result in completely different collector values. Let's say you find a 19760 Roosevelt dime in a box of old coins. The coin has moderate wear, some scratches, and a few dark spots. You inspect it and confirm the D-mint mark. In this case, you probably have an ordinary circulated example. It may be worth around its face value, perhaps with a small collector premium depending on its exact condition and the buyer. Now imagine another coin. It is also a 19760, but this one looks almost untouched. The surfaces have bright original luster, the portrait is extremely sharp, and the reverse torch bands are clearly defined. There are very few contact marks. That coin deserves much more attention. At this point, you should compare the coin with certified examples and consider whether professional grading might make sense. But don't automatically submit it. Grading costs money, and if the coin isn't truly high grade, you could spend more on certification than the coin is worth. A good strategy is to first learn how professional graders evaluate coins. Study examples of different grades and compare your coin under strong lighting. Look at the highest points of the design for wear. Check the fields for contact marks. Examine the luster and strike. Then decide whether the coin appears strong enough to justify further investigation. Now let's talk about weight. A standard 19760 Roosevelt dime should weigh approximately 2.7 grams. If you have an accurate scale and the coin is significantly different from that expected weight, it may deserve additional investigation. A major weight difference can sometimes indicate an unusual planchet or other mint-related issue. But don't jump to conclusions. Dirt, wear, damage, scale accuracy, and manufacturing tolerances can all affect measurements. You should also inspect the edge. The normal Roosevelt dime has a reeded edge. If the edge looks dramatically different, or if the coin appears to have an unusual shape, preserve it carefully. A genuine planchet error can be collectible, but proper identification is necessary. Now let's discuss the market value more directly. For a normal circulated 19760 Roosevelt dime, expect a value close to 10 cents. In better circulated grades, the coin may bring a modest premium, but it remains a common issue. Uncirculated examples can be worth more, particularly when they reach higher mint state grades. The highest quality certified examples can command significantly stronger prices than ordinary pocket change examples. The important point is that there is no single value for every 19760 Roosevelt dime. A worn coin and a pristine certified coin may share the same date and mint mark, but their market values can be dramatically different. This is also why online claims can be confusing. You may find someone listing a 19760 dime for hundreds or even thousands of dollars. That does not mean every coin is worth that amount. Always distinguish between an asking price and an actual market price. A real transaction or reputable auction result is much stronger evidence than an unrealistic online listing. Now let's think about what would make your 19760 dime genuinely exciting. First would be a major authenticated mint error. Second would be an exceptionally high mint state grade. Third would be outstanding strike quality, particularly strong full bands on the reverse. And fourth would be a recognized variety with documented collector interest. If your coin has none of those characteristics, it is probably an ordinary 19760 dime. And that's perfectly fine. Coin collecting isn't only about finding a coin worth thousands of dollars. It is also about discovering history, understanding how coins were made, and learning how small details affect value. One of the most useful things you can do is build a habit of checking your change. Look at the date, mint mark, condition, and unusual characteristics. You don't need expensive equipment. A simple magnifying glass, a good light, and an accurate scale can help you examine many coins. But remember, tools are only useful when you know how to interpret what you see. Let's take another close look at the mint mark. On the 19760 dime, the D appears near the lower left portion of the obverse. It should look like a small letter D. If you see it, that confirms the Denver origin. If you don't see a mint mark, you may have the Philadelphia issue instead. This is why mint marks are so important to coin collectors. Now think about the date again, 1976. This was America's bicentennial year. When you hold this coin, you are holding a small piece of a historic moment. Even if the market value is only 10 cents, the historical connection can make the coin meaningful. There is another interesting point about this coin. Because it is made from copper nickel-clad material, you should not expect the same melt value associated with silver Roosevelt dimes. If you are looking for silver, focus on Roosevelt dimes dated 1964 and earlier. The 19760 is not a silver coin. So if you have a 19760 dime in good circulated condition, the realistic expectation is simple. It is usually worth around face value, not hundreds of dollars. If it is in excellent uncirculated condition, its value can increase. If it is an exceptional certified high-grade coin or has a genuine mint error, the value can potentially rise much further. Before you spend your coin, perform one final inspection. Check the date. Check the D mint mark. Examine the surface for circulation wear. Look carefully at Roosevelt's portrait. Inspect Liberty and In God We Trust. Turn the coin over and study the torch. Look at the horizontal bands. Check the branches, lettering, and rim. Finally, inspect the edge and, if possible, weigh the coin accurately. If everything looks normal, you probably have a common 19760 Roosevelt dime. But if something looks unusual, don't clean it and don't alter it. Preserve the coin exactly as you found it and investigate further. The 19760 Roosevelt dime is a perfect example of why coin collecting can be so fascinating. More than 695 million were produced, so the ordinary example is common. But among all those coins, there can be differences in preservation, strike quality, errors, and grade. That's where the real collector interest begins. And remember, the most valuable coin in your collection isn't always the oldest one. Sometimes the difference is hidden in a tiny mint mark, a small error, an unusually sharp strike, or a coin that simply survived in extraordinary condition. So, what should you do if you have a 19760 Roosevelt dime? Don't assume it is rare just because it is nearly 50 years old. Don't assume it is worthless either. Examine it carefully. If it is circulated and ordinary, it will likely remain a 10-cent coin or carry only a small premium. If it is extremely well preserved or has a genuine mint error, then it deserves a much closer look. Thank you for watching Coin Reveal USA. If you enjoy discovering the real value, history, mint marks, errors, varieties, and hidden details of American coins, make sure you subscribe to Coin Reveal USA and turn on notifications so you never miss another coin reveal. And remember, always check your coins before you spend them because the smallest details can sometimes make the biggest difference. Keep searching, keep learning, and keep revealing the coins hiding in plain sight. This is Coin Reveal USA, and I'll see you in the next coin reveal.